Okay, there's going to be a scenario where a new caliphate forms. There's all those Arab caliphates that were mostly in like Arabia and North Africa, and then like the one that starts with a U was like all this. So yeah, we're going to seeing what would happen if suddenly another one like came back. So it's probably pretty clearly going to start in Saudi Arabia, right here. I'm not sure exactly why this would be happening, but we'll just say that bunch of people here decided that they want to do this really badly, and all the major alliances of the world are gone and stuff. So yeah. Anyway, these people over here, they pretty quickly take the southern coast and all of the coast on the west side, and then start pushing inwards from this little bump. They make their way up here and down through here, or thickening out down here. They continue to send up a small expedition here, but eventually stops. Instead, they start heading, whatever, across the desert. And they make it to the other side and take all of this coast. From there, this entire northern part slowly bumbles up until it dies. And then what's left down here is just slowly pushed out and eventually gone. So with that, this new caliphate has formed. I don't know what it would be called, but yeah, and it has its sights on making a new caliphate, obviously. So the first thing it wants to do is conquer Arabia. They ask all these countries if they want to join, but they all say no. So now they're going to go after 3 separate countries all at once: Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. Now the reason for this is because, they're all very weak and just kind of instantly crumble over. So they're obviously going to fully annex all of them as well. And now they're a little bit bigger. Now they're going to go after the UAE. And yeah, they start pushing into the UAE like this, focusing on the coast over here. But soon enough, Oman and even Yemen are going to join in on this war on the side of the blue team. It's probably not very realistic because of all the stuff happening in Yemen, but sure. So these two start pushing up over on this coast mostly, but Oman also does a little bit over here, as well as mostly defending over here in the UAE. Saudi Arabia, the Caliphate, still manages to push through it, but they're kind of slowed down by a lot. They also take this little exclave of Oman. I'm pretty sure that's owned by Oman. Over here, though, this is where the blue team is focusing most of their troops, and it's going pretty well, as they manage to take a decent chunk of the southern piece of what was Saudi Arabia before. They also then meet up with these front lines, but over here, the UAE capitulates, and I'll say Caliphidian, but that's probably not right. But troops from the Caliphate start flooding into Oman and going through this entire northern part. I'm pretty sure this is like where most of their population is. Like, I don't think many people live over here. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it is. So, yeah. With that, they kind of have to take back some of their troops. And so they do, with that increase in troops, they manage to push them back a little bit. And over here, they start to make a surprise attack into Yemen, make the coast. And with, like I said, all the internal issues in Yemen, it pretty quickly, after this, just completely crumbles up and gets dissolved, essentially. So Saudi Arabia continues to take most of it. And by the time it capitulates, it's now just what's left of Oman. They get pushed out there, as well as pushed out here. They take this island, too. And then, yeah, they're gone. So, unsurprisingly, they're going to be fully annexing all of these countries. And it's now gonna look more like this. So, with that, they are now looking to like most of the Arabian Peninsula. If not all, I'm not sure where the boundary is exactly. I would assume it's like right here. So, I mean, all that's left is this. But anyway, we're now going to see something pretty surprising happen. A pretty big coalition just kind of suddenly forms against them. So we see Israel, who is at war with Palestine, so we're going to make them red. Jordan, Iraq, Iran, and even Eritrea decide to join in on this war. So, seeing this, Saudi Arabia kind of just ignores Eritrea because they're pretty weak and by themselves, and so they start to push mostly up here. Up here now that they have all these countries on their side, which is, I mean, this is very unlikely to be one front, but they're all just kind of united against this common enemy for now. Doesn't mean they're allies. But Israel still manages to push through and capture all of Palestine, and so they then take this land around the coast and begin to push in like this. There's a lot of naval battles over here between the Caliphate and Iran, with the Caliphate eventually winning most of them and making landings on Iran. Over here, they continue to push up slightly into Iraq and Iran, but it doesn't go too far, and a pretty big wave of troops is sent down here, and they start kind of tunneling through this part of the Caliphate. Eritrea also makes a landing over here, sorry about that, but Eritrea makes a landing over here, and that connects up with these people, so it actually was pretty useful, because now they have one unified front line over here, and that's not too great. The Caliphate continues to push in over here, but it doesn't go exceptionally far, and over here they're just continuing to lose troops and get pushed back deeper into their country, so that's not great. Seeing this, they decide to finally pull out some of their troops, and Iran pretty quickly takes back most of their land, but the Caliphate does manage to reconnect to this coast and also push down here. However, Iran and Iraq fully push out the Caliphates from their land and start going in here. These troops also fled back down over here, and going through these rebellious areas, they meet very little resistance, and it's pretty clear that the blue team is going to win this war. But the Caliphate manages to turn the tide of the war by convincing Egypt to join in on their side. They're both Arab countries, and they say that they're going to unite after this, because, they're trying to reform the Caliphate, which is just, the Islam Empire, kind of, I think. But anyway, with this, Egypt is pretty suddenly going to make a push into Israel and Jordan and Palestine. And now it looks like this as they completely wipe out the Israelis. I think that's what it's called. Saudi Arabia now focuses most of their troops down here in the south, and they manage to reclaim most of their southern half. But because of that, a giant chunk over here in the north falls over to the blue team. They then start spearheading up here to reconnect with Egypt. And so if they do that, they give Egypt some troops to wipe out Jordan with, and then they go down here to kick Eritrea out of Yemen, as well as just kind of push into it and take it. Over here, Iran makes a naval landing on the UAE and starts pushing down here in this coast, like this. But now Saudi Arabia and Egypt continue to make a pretty substantial push over here, as they also meet up with this coast and then send out like a twin invasion over here that cuts off this little chunk, and that's taken. They also managed to reconnect up here with the Persian Gulf, I think. And now, looks like this. These troops are almost kind of stranded, and being in the desert, I'm pretty sure this is desert, and they kind of, overheat, essentially, and eventually get pushed out. Oman, or not Oman, but Iran still manages to hold out pretty strongly over here, but Iraq completely crumbles, and now as Iran starts to have troops pushing to them, they pull out their troops from here, and instead work on just defending up to here. The war just keeps going back and forth from here, with both sides making occasional pushes in, but these are usually repelled pretty quickly, and eventually they're just going to decide to agree for peace. So, Eritrea is going to be annexed, first of all. And the majority of these countries are going to be as well. Finally, see the first one that isn't fully annexed is Iran. Or not Iran. Yes, Iran. They aren't fully annexed. But the first one to lose land who isn't getting fully annexed is Iraq. Over there. They're reduced to just their northern part, though. So, that's not great for them. Also, probably not great that they have Israel and Palestine united in this one thing, but they're just going to have to do something about that. Probably not ethically, but yeah. This is now what the borders look like. So their next target's going to be Sudan, and this isn't really going to be too hard of a war. No one really comes to Sudan's aid. In fact, South Sudan joins in on the war against Sudan. No, that's wrong. And, yeah. So they pretty quickly take this coast. South Sudan manages to push in over here and reconnect up here. And then start moving down the Nile and cutting off most of this. South Sudan continues to push up here as Sudan completely crumbles. And I've said crumbles a lot this video. I don't know why. But yeah, this thing falls over. And then the rest of Sudan is just pretty much desert. So they pretty quickly capitulate. This time, the borders are gonna look more like this. Hold on. So the Caliphate's gonna take most of this northern land. And South Sudan is gonna get a good chunk of the southern part of Sudan that isn't South Sudan. That makes sense. Fine. Yes. So now the Caliphate's looking pretty big, and they're gonna go after Libya next, and Tunisia's actually gonna join in too, because they got declared war on as well. But anyway, they continue to push in along this coast. They take Libya's capital pretty fast, and now start moving all the way over here, cutting Tunisia in two, and the entire thing falls over. And, I mean, yeah, this war is pretty one-sided, and very quickly all two of these countries fall over and are gone. So, for this peace treaty, we're going to see the Caliphate get a very good portion of land, including all of Tunisia. Border is going to be right about here, which leaves what's left of Libya as essentially just desert. So I'm not sure how well that's going to go, but yeah. Next push up here is into Syria and Lebanon. Do I really even have to show this war? It's over very quickly, and these countries aren't, and yeah. There is almost fully annexed, but Syria barely manages to exist now. But, surprisingly, Turkey is going to go after, I guess it'll be like this. But Turkey is going to go after these two countries, what's left of them, and that's not very chill of them. Well, in the Caliphate's eyes. And, I mean, pretty quickly they just, take them over. But anyway, it's kind of an unpopular decision among the government, very controversial and almost 50-50 vote. But the Caliphate's going to see this as Turkey kind of taking advantage of all the hard war that they just fought. Now that, because they weakened these two countries so severely that it wasn't even a challenge anymore. And so, in retaliation, they're going to declare war on Turkey. Turkey just had a lot of their troops stationed down here, though, so they are actually able to push down the coast over here. But the Caliphates continue to just go up into slow triangle shape. Unfortunately for the Caliphate, though, Iran is going to be joining in on this war. Also, remember, just like I said with Iran and Israel being on the same team, so I mean they're allies, they're just fighting against one common enemy. Yeah. And with this, we're going to see Iran and Turkey make pretty big advancements over here as they push down this coast. The Caliphate takes their troops out of here, but they do manage to kick them, the Turkeys, and the Iranians out. However, a lot of countries are going to see this as a good opportunity because they're regional powers that were kind of overthrown in terms of power by these guys. So Algeria and Ethiopia both join in on this war. So now we see a united front line. Well, not united. I mean, united in terms of the side they're fighting on, but not in terms of geography. But we see all four of these countries now begin one very big push into the Caliphate. So they now are pushed all the way back here as their front line begins to, get more spread out. We also see Libya join in, and Sudan, because they both want revenge. And I mean, these countries are like deserts, so they really aren't going to be contributing much, but still, it is something. Algeria mostly focuses on the coast, and that's also where Sudan and Libya send all their, 10 troops. But they do a pretty good job of going all the way over to, Egypt. Ethiopia mostly focuses in on Sudan and Egypt, pushing up this coast. Turkey goes through here, and like I said, this thing just was not going to work over here, so yeah, it pretty easily falls over. They meet up with the Suez Canal. Rebels also pop up here in Oman and Yemen and the UAE, and aided by Iran's naval invasions, they pretty quickly roll through here. They also begin to take this coast, where I'm pretty sure that's where the capital is. And now they start pushing into Egypt, and the entire thing capitulates. And now we see what's left of the Caliphate just completely crumble under all of these countries. So, yeah. Looking at the peace treaty, it's going to be pretty tough on the Caliphate. First of all, we see Algeria take almost all of Tunisia, as well as I think some of Libya. But speaking of Libya, they are going to be getting their border not only put back, but they're probably going to be gaining some land, as well as Sudan, though they still have their land lost down here to South Sudan, but still. And Ethiopia will just knock all these guys out in one. So Libya is now going to look like this. Sudan pushed all the way up to here. And Ethiopia pretty much just gets Eritrea. As well as... well, no. In the northern part, Turkey and Iran both get a pretty substantial amount of land. Turkey almost kind of reforms the Ottoman Empire a little here, as they take all the Sinai Peninsula and this northern land, and Iran takes a very big chunk of this coast. I see Egypt being made into a country, this thing that's left of Egypt, I should say. Yemen is brought back, but like I said, because of the internal issues, it's all crumbled and dissolved. I said crumbled again. This is probably not at all accurate, but you can imagine. You see this new kind of Oman slash UAE union, also Qatar, form over here. And finally, it says the final nail in the coffin. We see Saudi Arabia and the Caliphate be made into two separate countries. I guess this would be Saudi Arabia, and this would be the Caliphate. So yeah, this pretty drastically changed the Middle East, and it's almost unrecognizable now, especially in Arabia. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Goodbye.